Sénatrice Galvez.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Honorable colleagues, I rise today to speak to the government's inquiry number 1, calling the attention of the Senate to the budget entitled Canada Strong, tabled in the House of Commons on November 4, 2025. Budget 2025 ensures continuity and demonstrates clear efforts to modernize Canada's fiscal framework. This budget resonates strongly with promises of a generational shift and even claims of climate action is not just a moral obligation, but an economic necessity. Yet, when we look at the details, the plan repeats old formulas while deferring the bold action that true nation building demands. The government's new capital budgeting framework gives the deficit a makeover, recasting almost every dollar as an investment. The plan promises to balance day-to-day spending with revenues by 2028 to 2029, while nearly doubling capital expenditures from $32.2 billion in 2024 to 2025 to $59.6 billion in 2029-2030. By then, 100% of the deficit will be branded as investment spending. But branding isn't proof. Budget 2025, unfortunately, offers no metric of return, no measure of efficiency, and no test of climate alignment to show whether these billions being spent are building resilience, adaptation, or simply deepening the debt. The intent to modernize fiscal planning is welcome, but transparency on the real return of this investment, economic, social, and environmental, is essential for public trust. Budget 2025 also presents $25.2 billion in savings over 4 years through cuts to federal operating costs to reduce inefficiencies and automated processes. In the past, uniform cuts have rarely had desirable effects, and departments with a smaller budget have lost a far greater share of their operational capacity. Environment and Climate Change Canada is expected to save $1.1 billion over 4 years through automatization and program wind-downs. In comparison, natural resources must cut up to 15% over 3 years by ending initiatives such as the 2 Billion Trees Program. Efficiency and modernization are laudable, but cutting capacity in key departments undermines the very outcomes modernization seeks to achieve. According to Professor Mazzucato, a leading economist at University College London, efficiency comes not from blunt austerity, but from strategic governance. Cuts should target activities that do not create public value, that duplicate administration, that have outdated subsidies and siloed programs. Government must protect and strengthen mission-oriented capacities, such as science, regulation, public procurement, and co-creation with communities and indigenous people. In short, trimming the bureaucracy around delivery, not the expertise that drive innovation and long-term economic and social returns. The government calls it climate competitiveness strategy, a central pillar of the plan to make Canada the strongest economy in the G7, based on results, not in objectives. By cutting environmental protection initiatives and programs, Canada keeps, unfortunately, falling short of what is needed to compete in the global economy already moving towards clean energy and clean technology. This year, it is predicted that about $2.2 trillion will be invested in renewable, nuclear, electrical grids, storage, batteries, low-emission fuels, efficiency, and electrification, twice the amount expected to be invested in oil and gas. According to the International Energy Agency World's Energy Report this year, 2025, and I quote, "Investment trends are being shaped by the onset of the age of electricity and surging electricity demands across industry, mobility, data center, and artificial intelligence." Dear colleagues, the age of electricity is here. In 2025, China, several US states, and the European Union invested $627 billion, $400 billion, and $386 billion US dollars, respectively, in clean energy. As leader in the age of electricity, these states and nations are positioning themselves as electrostates. At the same time, several petrostates, including Canada, are expanding fossil fuel production and refusing to leave the fossil fuel era. Global trackers indicate that Canada's climate actions appear to be stalling, rating it as highly insufficient, and while costly extreme weather events devastate communities, noting in Budget 2025 won't achieve these metrics. The new post-2030 carbon pricing trajectory and the improved backstop repackage commitments. The Critical Mineral Sovereignty Fund, worth $2 billion over 5 years, reprofile existing Natural Resources Canada initiative and match-toted carbon contracts are likely too small to transform the markets, while the suit of refundable tax credit is a mere extension of programs launched in 22 and 24. The most concerning, to me personally, is the extension of the carbon capture, utilization, and storage investment tax credit. First, carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects are generally focused on extracting more oil or gas and less on storing carbon dioxide underground. So carbon capture and storage is more likely to increase greenhouse gas emissions than to lower them. Second, CCS has a long history of under-delivering and failing to reduce emissions, and this is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future. Notably, the first large-scale of CCS project intended for negative net emissions began operating in 1996. After almost 30 years, there should be more progress and higher levels of large-scale implementation for a technology that presents real promise. The CCUS investment tax credits is likely to be another inefficient fossil fuel subsidy. Ultimately, the climate competitiveness strategy in Budget 2025 takes a small step towards climate preparedness, but falls short on the scale the climate and economic emergency demand. The 40 million two-year youth climate course is welcome, of course, as are the 257.6 million for 4 leased firefighting aircraft and the 55.4 million for a new national public alerting system. These are, of course, very positive measures, but very, very modest compared to the record-breaking wildfire floods and insurance losses that costed $9.2 billion only last year. Do we think Canada is rich enough that we can continue wasting funds on inefficient subsidies and still expect to thrive in a global economy that is rapidly shifting towards low-carbon growth? The real question is whether Canada is keeping pace with economical signals of competitiveness. And those signals, dear colleagues, are very clear. First, global investment trends, now favoring clean energy over fossil fuels. Market competitiveness have shifted, with solar and wind now the cheapest new electricity source worldwide. Policy direction in the EU, China, and many US states is driving capital into clean technologies. Corporate shift reflect growing adoption of science-based target and fossil-free portfolios. Innovation in hydrogen, battery, storage, circular models shows where future jobs are growing. The risk landscape is tightening as climate impacts strand high-carbon assets. And public demand overwhelmingly favors affordable clean energy and resilience. Canadians needed clear signals of climate-aligned financial leadership in the budget, but few appear. mobilizing capital for transition to net zero, the government reconfirmed its plan to develop a made-in-Canada taxonomy, with completion delayed to before the end of 2026. It also indicates its intention to explore the development of a sustainable bond framework. But key initiatives were missing: a green nation-building fund to advance renewable energy and adaptation with indigenous partners, and a framework to align the financial sector with Canada's legally binding climate commitments. Canada needs a clear framework to guide the financial sector in mitigated climate risk, redirecting capital towards resilience and decarbonation, and reporting transparently on progress. I advise you read the news. Last week, the Bank of England just did a major big step in this direction. When capital is diverted to assets that become stranded, growth is lost. Without climate-aligned financial flows, Canada faces a vicious cycle: inflation driven by climate shocks, rising indebtedness from bailouts, and weak growth from stranded industries. We need a budget that funds clean growth and relies on a robust framework to shift finance toward low-carbon growth, fights inflation, and secures long-term prosperity. Other G7 economies are already integrating climate risk into their regulation, creating taxonomies, and redirecting investment towards clean growth. Without similar accountability, Canada risks becoming a stranded capital nation, reliant on devaluing fossil assets while others seize tomorrow's market. Left unchecked, climate risk is inflation risk, debt risk, and competitiveness risk. Finally, in Budget 2025, the government announced its plans to update existing greenwashing provisions by removing the requirement for business to substantiate their environmental benefits claim based on internationally recognized methodologies, standards, and repealing the ability of third parties to prosecute greenwashing claims directly before the competition tribunal. Currently, these provisions provide needed protections to consumers against false claims and require business to substantiate their claims based on international standards. The bottom line is that a business should not make any claim, green or otherwise, without sound evidence. Requiring claims to be substantiated based on international standards merely ensures that the evidence supporting claim is sound. Growth of Canada's green market depends on effecting greenwashing provision. Budget 2025 could have been the moment when fiscal disciplines met climate ambition. Instead, it leans on past frameworks, future promises, and cuts that weaken delivery. The tools exist to align dollars with duty and finance with the future. Every dollar invested in adaptation and resilience generates more than tens of dollars in benefits per decade. Nation building must be rooted in innovation, economic competitiveness, energy independence, and the mobilization of public and private financing for renewable and clean energy projects and community-led resilience building. This year, the 7th of 9 planetary boundaries was breached for the first time. This means, dear colleague, the Earth system that supports life and all economies are destabilizing. A Canada-strong budget must deliver economic prosperity, security, and healthy environments, all while addressing the multiple crises we so urgently need to tackle to ensure a sustainable future for all of us and future generations. Merci. Thank you. Mewich.